Pacific Northwest has been the site for a pilot program to help manufacturers comply with cybersecurity requirements. And based on feedback from this program, we're launching this monthly check-in to provide relevant information and, more importantly, lots of time for your questions to be answered by our cybersecurity experts. Today, we're covering content for both management and technical staff. Everyone is welcome and all questions are good questions. So I invite your colleagues to future programs, and we'll also make a recording available for you. Today's program is generously supported by Impact Washington, Oregon Manufacturing Extension Partnership, Tech Help Idaho, Alaska Manufacturing Extension Partnership Center, and in partnership with Pacific Northwest Defense Coalition and Pacific Northwest Aerospace Alliance. So I know we have some of our friends from these organizations on the line. Carol Bladen and Damon Nix with Impact Washington, if you want to wave and chat your contact information. I saw Dale King with PNNA, Pacific Northwest Aerospace Alliance. I believe we have Jeff Stell with Business Oregon, another partner on the line here today. Did I miss anyone? Feel free to unmute and say hi if I did. Great. Well, I'm Kate Canapo with the Pacific Northwest Defense Coalition, PNDC. PDC's mission includes supporting our members to bring more defense and security contracts to the Pacific Northwest and support a strong, connected, and secure supply chain. And we all know that cybersecurity is an important part of a solid and resilient supply chain. For our members that are working with the Department of Defense and anybody in the manufacturing community and service providers. So thank you all for joining us here today. This might be new information for everyone, but so in case you are new, I just wanted to give you some relevant information to get started here. You might hear reference to CMMC, which is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. And it's an it is a program that the Department of Defense has launched, working with the CMMC accreditation body. And it's a framework that requires up to 5 levels of cybersecurity maturity for all DoD suppliers. So from level 1, which is very basic security, to level 5, which is very high. So that's what that is referring to. If you're not in the defense supply chain, it's still a cybersecurity framework. There's other frameworks as well. They're all good to get started on, and they all help protect your business against the risk of cyber threats. I have a lot of people asking us about different requirements. Their vendors are coming to them, or their customers are coming to them asking about CMMC or SPURS scores or NIST 800-171. This is all referencing a holistic cybersecurity program. And the speakers and I were on a chat before this, and we were all going, all cybersecurity is good cybersecurity. So if you're going in any direction, you're working to protect your business. So most important to get started, and congratulations, you're all on the line today to do so. Today's agenda, we're going to start off with Damon Nix with Impact Washington to go over a few points on some of the programs that they have available. Rick Rosenberry with Brownrigg Insurance is going to join us and talk about cyber insurance, sharing some tips, tricks, and traps. Then we'll have our panel, Tom Cornelius with ComplianceForge, Adam Austin with Totem Technologies, and Dave Miller with FNI, or Future Networks. Then we're real pleased to have Paul Michaels, Director of Aerospace with GM Nameplates, who will share some lessons learned when he went through his cybersecurity journey with his organization here. So as we get started here, I did want to bring up this slide. Those of you that have been on the program before have seen this before, and we'll send out the slide deck for you. But I think it's important to understand where you are in your cybersecurity journey as an industry, and moving along this continuum. Are you moving from confusion to understanding why you need to be cyber secure to how to be cyber secure? And then if you're looking at roadblocks, how to look at a step-by-step process to overcome that. So listen to our speakers today and look for opportunities to do that. Damon, did you want to share a few words? Damon Nix with Impact Washington.
Yes, thank you so much, Kate. Impact Washington is thrilled to be a sponsor of the Cybersecurity Forum, and so thankful for all the people who've been involved. It's rewarding to see so many people show up month in, month out to learn more. This is such a great community that's committed to helping their companies, their organizations get better and better, take that next step, whatever it is in cybersecurity. And Impact Washington certainly wants to be a part of that for our small, medium-sized, any size manufacturers in the state of Washington. That is our mission as the state of Washington's Manufacturing Extension Partnership Center. There's one in every state. We're a nonprofit, and our mission is to bring resources to manufacturers to respond to critical needs. And cybersecurity is absolutely one of those critical needs. Not simply, it's been an emerging need, it is going to be an ongoing need. And so we want to make sure we're here marshaling resources, connecting with great partners like we have on this forum to be able to help manufacturers take those steps, be compliant, be able to access more business and stay in the supply chain and grow their business in the supply chain. So I encourage you to reach out to us. There's a link here if you're interested in learning more about how your state's MEP can help you. Not only in the state of Washington, if you're watching this or joining us from Oregon, Alaska, from Idaho, Utah, Montana, California, wherever you are, there are great MEP centers in each state that have outstanding cybersecurity resources. We'd be happy to introduce you to those folks. More than that, we also have access in each of our states to special grant programs or opportunities that may be able to support that. So I know in the state of Washington, we have a few legacy grant programs. We would, if finances are a concern, or cost is a concern, we'd love to help you. If you're a small company, get started on your journey, we can definitely have a discussion about that. So I hope you'll join us for next month's forum as well as we round out the 2021 year. But thank you so much for joining. And if Impact Washington can be a support for you, please reach out. I put my email in the chat. I'll throw it back to you, Kate. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Damon. Appreciate it. And I am putting a chat here as well. If you're in Oregon and need help with some cybersecurity grant funding, do reach out. We have a program that Business Oregon is supporting as well. So I guess there's lots of help out there. Reach out, make sure that you are looking for solutions to move through this, because it is not going away, as Damon said. Great. I am now going to introduce Rick Rosenberry with Brownrigg Insurance to talk to us about cyber insurance tips, tricks, and trap. And Rick, thank you for joining us from your vacation in Mexico. I hear a storm's brewing there, you said. So hopefully the connection will be good throughout that. So please feel free to begin.
Yeah, so the connection's been good so far. There's a storm going, but I am excited. We recently joined the PNDC, but I wanted to talk about specifically with manufacturing cyber insurance tips and tricks, especially with supply chain. I know PNDC's mission is to help the supply chain, so I wanted to make sure that I have some specifics, not just for people that are working through level 3, but for the lower levels, and maybe they're their suppliers as well. But I know cyber insurance, especially in the last couple of years, people have seen a lot of losses. Prices have started to go up to reflect those losses. But with a community, and especially all of the defense contractors getting really serious about putting in protections and monitoring, there's a really great opportunity for us as a community to bring the risks and bring the losses down in as a whole, and that reflects directly on the cost of premiums. And so I see that definitely happening, especially as companies start to take the requirements and at least regular hygiene and pass those on to the people that they use, and then those companies continue to pass that on, and so we don't have holes in the supply chain where there could be somebody that does have a loss. And another thing that people have been asking is, what do I need to have in place in order to get cyber insurance? And if you are going through level 3, it is super easy. Everything that you need in order to bring those costs down through level 3 is included in the CMMC, and we are working to build programs and have a system to where the insurance companies understand exactly what we're doing, and with insurance, especially with cyber business insurance, making it clear to the underwriters of what we're doing. And the more clear we can make it that we as a group are working to monitor and protect, the lower we can make the premiums for insurance. And then the other thing is, why would somebody want to have cyber insurance? And for manufacturing, most people just think of, hey, if somebody hacks into my system and I have a loss, cover that. But really the benefits that I see most people, especially in a supply chain, finding is that once you have a policy in place, you get all of the forensic benefits, and then you have a response team. So as you're going through, I know CMMC level 3 requires you to have a response plan in place, and you have to prove that that is something that's working, and you can control any losses that happen, and cyber insurance can help with that, because you will be issued a really huge, amazing set of response people, and they help not just with finding who did this, but making sure your systems come up as fast as possible and reaching out to your customers in the best way to help them, and then to protect your image if there was a loss. And then one of the traps that I see with cyber insurance, or with people that a lot of companies, especially now that cyber insurance is getting more mainstream, will have either a small add-on to their policy that covers some of that, but they may not cover third-party losses. And so I just wanted to make sure people knew. We had a claim situation in the industry where a manufacturer lawyer had gotten their their email hacked, and then had reached out to the manufacturer and said, hey, we need to change some information for the banking information. And because it was a third party that ended up getting hacked and then that loss was caused, it requires third party coverage. As for first party is just if you're hacked or attacked. So having a conversation, it may not make sense for everybody to get third party coverage, especially when they have the systems in place for their people. Training employees and letting them know that you need to go ahead and make that call if somebody emails a change. But having that conversation and looking at that risk and making sure if you are currently insured that you do have, you know exactly what what's insured and what risks you're bringing on, self-insuring those risks. And then another thing specific to supply chain with cyber is business interruption insurance. I know a lot of you have parts that you're creating, and there's several other suppliers that you rely on. And if that supplier has an incident, that's going to affect you almost as much as if you had an incident, because you can't build your part that incorporates other people. So cyber insurance does include and can include business interruption. So if you have a subcontractor, somebody that's building something for you or an add-on, you can get coverage to where if they have an incident, that covers your business interruption and can protect you from the loss of not being able to deliver your product. And then the thing that I see, and I'm excited about the future, is people are taking real ownership of actually making sure, not just following the compliance, but making sure that they have the established things in place and then passing them on to people. So making sure that, you know, maybe the lawyer that you're working with has a cyber insurance policy or has those things in place, and working with whoever is working with your compliance or your IT department to make a list of all of your risks and all of the people that you're handing information to and back from, and figuring out whether they're not protected or insured, and whether it's going to make financial sense to get a policy in place for them.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. I appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions? Feel free to unmute and ask your question, or chat it in the chat and we can read it to our speaker. Right. One question, Rick, that I know has come up before: if you do have a cyber insurance policy, and you do have an incident, somebody hacks into your system or you discover something, a lot of the policies require you to use the insurance's forensic company. Is that true, or kind of is insurance your first? Who are you going to call first? Is it should it be your insurance company?
So generally you would call, you would call the insurance company first, and it's usually a lot easier for most people because they have not just a forensics team, but they have the PR team that can come in right away, and they do have the damage mitigation team. You can, once you start getting that policy in place, if you have someone that you like to use, you can have a conversation with them if you have a plan in place. Most companies, and this may change as things get more sophisticated and people continue to work towards cyber hygiene. They may have their own plans in place, but a lot of companies rely on the insurance carrier to help them put together a plan, or at least fill gaps in their plan.
Right, right. I am going to invite our panel on the line as well to join us here now, and we can take additional questions. So we are very pleased to have Tom Cornelius with ComplianceForge, Adam Austin with Totem Technologies, and Dave Miller with FNI on the line. Welcome, gentlemen. I encourage everyone to ask questions. This is your opportunity to talk to these cybersecurity experts, no matter where you are in your cybersecurity journey. They can help and give you some input. Tom, maybe I'll go to you first on this. So we're talking about incident response, and obviously the insurance is a piece to that. What are kind of some tips that you have for people to put in their incident response plan? Who should you call first? What should you do? Maybe some.
Well, with incident response, everything always starts with planning before an incident actually happens, because one of the biggest things you have to think about, especially even from an insurance perspective, is everything has to be viewed from a potential litigation perspective. So proper evidence handling procedures, because if you do something that jeopardizes the evidence, that may be something that, one, you could be considered negligent, in some of your actions, but at the same time, it could make it so that you couldn't prosecute either a bad employee or a hacker or something along those lines. So understanding the prior planning needs before an incident ever happens is the most important thing to consider.
Right.
Adam, I think Dave Henderson had a question.
Yeah, awesome. Dave, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. I'm president and co-founder of a managed support provider in the greater Seattle area, and I support a lot of manufacturers. I know the answer to this question, but I think it's an important one, Rick. If I am outsourcing my IT, should I be relying on the insurance that my IT provider carries, or should I be carrying my own cybersecurity insurance?
So it is always best to carry your own insurance. There are protections that you can get from your IT person, especially if they have errors and omissions tech E&O coverage, which if you are working with a cyber professional, I would make sure that they have tech E&O. It's like if you were to have somebody build your house, it's general liability coverage for a online service provider. So if they do make mistakes, whether that's something that they just missed, or maybe they're not as knowledgeable as they thought, which usually it's just a small mistake in this industry, because I've met a lot of people that really know what they're doing. But if there is a loss that's caused because of that, then their E&O would pick that up.
Right.
If I could back that up just a little bit by saying we have errors and omissions, and we also have a separate cyber crime coverage, right? So we have both, and we should. And what I tell my clients is, you want your own cybersecurity insurance for a number of reasons. One of them is, when you want to hit my insurance, you need your insurance company's attorneys going after my insurance company's attorneys. It's not expensive. Don't rely on your IT provider to provide that coverage.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. Great advice. Adam, I see that you chatted some information in about incident response. Or Tom, sorry, did you have a comment?
Oh, sure. I was just going to chime in real quick. Cyber insurance is also only as good as what you're able to prove. So one of the things that companies really have to take to heart is that purely by buying cybersecurity insurance doesn't mean that that's going to be your get out of jail free card. Because, you know, when you get lawyers involved, either from, it could be from a regulator, it could be from the insurance company or whoever, you need to be able to have evidence to prove due care and due diligence, that you knew what your requirements were and that you were actually doing care and feeding of those cybersecurity controls. Because if not, you could be considered negligent. And depending on how your policy is written, if you're considered negligent, that may be a loophole that the insurance provider doesn't have to pay out. So just something to always, understand what you're actually paying for.
And one thing that was touched on earlier, Kate touched on this with Rick, is, the service provider providing the defense against whatever is happening. And so whatever the incident is, the security incident is, who do you go to first? What is written within the policy itself? And then what is the risk of that incident? If it's a ransomware, how does your insurance cover that? What is in place against that? And then what are the legal implications of that relative to the insurance and what you disclose to the public? So all of that's very important.
And that brings up a great point, Tom, that you want to make sure you have those things in place, and you want to make sure that you don't say you have something in place when you don't, because you can get cyber insurance without having every single thing in place, and it can still be, affordable and feasible. But that's when you end up in a claim situation, is if you do say that, yeah, I've got that taken care of, we're using multi-factor authentication, and then you have a whole system that's not, that can cause problems. Most of the companies we deal with work with you in those situations. They're not just going to leave you out to dry. But I do recommend having your IT professional work with you, attend those meetings and be involved in getting your cyber insurance, because some of that they'll understand, the specialized lingo and know your systems and know that you have everything in place, and then you're all set.
Right. Adam, I know you had posted something about an incident response template. Did you want to give a little bit more information on some of the key points that you'd want to have in that?
Yeah, I was going to say, one of your best sources of insurance is being able to help yourself. And so in an incident response plan, which I put a link to a webpage where we have free tools, including a free download of a incident response plan template. But the key to incident response is being able to, quote unquote, stop the bleeding, fight the fire, get in the fight right away. And containment, we call this containment, right? Containing the problem. If you can establish a sort of quick start guide into incident response in your incident response plan, including having things like an incident response aid, like a desktop aid or a pamphlet that you can hand out to your employees, that gives them some simple steps to help get in the fight and fight that fire, to minimize the damage, minimize the impact, and then sort out all the insurance and legal stuff a little bit later. But one of the key steps, one of the key things you can train your employees on and your staff on, and your managed service providers, is disconnect from the network if you suspect an attack, right? To help stop the spread of the attack and limit the footprint of the damage, limit the ultimate impact to your organization. So this is harkening back to your first question, Kate, when we turned it over to the panel, which is, what would you include in your incident response plan? And that is an emphasis on containment right away, as soon as possible, to start fighting that fire.
And just to add on to what Adam was saying, it comes down to having tailored specific for your business, what an indicator of compromise might look like, generally called an IOC. So certain types of attacks or anything that could be considered anomalous, you're going to want to educate your workforce to say, if you see this, that is a very likely chance that your system is compromised, or different things along those lines. So that indicators of compromise can help your security team, your IT provider, get on an incident much quicker, instead of just like say, oh well, someone else must know what's going on, where assumptions really will come back and bite people. So it's all about reporting indicators of compromise as quickly as possible.
Mhm. And to follow up on what Tom is saying, the majority of attacks are human-based. It's social engineering. And so communicating a problem immediately, or as soon as one realizes it within the organization, that is probably the most important step. I mean, there's of course the technical side, there's the, I'll call it, behind the veil data theft side, but many of the attacks that are happening are social engineering attacks. And so training of the people to respond quickly to it, to alert IT, to unplug their system, as what Adam was saying, if each employee knows that, then each employee is an effective defense against an incident.
And the way, Kate, if I could continue.
Yeah.
The way we train our employees, so we're a small business, we have fewer than 20 employees. We literally have a little pamphlet printed out on cardstock that's set by everybody's workstation. And it describes some of those common indicators of compromise that Dave and Tom have been talking about. Like, if you notice something weird with your computer, it's slow, the mouse is moving without you moving or the cursor's moving without you moving your mouse, those sorts of things. So a list of like half a dozen of those types of things. Then the hair on the back of your neck should go up. It should set off your spidey sense. And so we sort of drill on this. We train on it annually. I drill on it whenever whenever we have like a lunchtime meeting. Like, take it seriously. Don't just brush it off. And if it makes the hair on the back of your end of your neck stand up, disconnect from the network as the very first thing. Call us and we will try to figure it out. It's better to err on the side of caution. In the case of like what Dave's talking about with social engineering and the prevalence of ransomware. I'm just looking at the Verizon data breach investigative report from this year. In the manufacturing sector, ransomware has been spiking this year over last year. So it's a serious threat. It's becoming more and more serious for manufacturing every day.
Another thing we've seen with our clients is there's a sense to be proactive, and how, one can ask, how can one be proactive on a cybersecurity incident? But very often when a high level person, an executive within the organization is traveling, then social engineering, the folks know that that's a perfect time to attack, because that direct face-to-face communication is not available. It's by phone or email or whatever. So when it comes to a social engineering attack for asking for money, I mean, that seems to be the most common in our experience. Hey, I need this money right now to close this deal. And somehow they know. Then they are.
Sorry, it seems like you got muted there. Are you? Dave, you're on mute.
There we go. That's right. Okay. So somehow they know what's going on with the deal. Then they're able to ask for that money. They're able to sort of infiltrate the social aspect of what's going on without there being a double or triple check. So just one very fundamental thing we suggest to our clients is double check, make that phone call, make sure that that person that you think, is doing something a little off, that they're the person that's really asking that. They really need that for a reason.
39% of, in the last year, manufacturers have experienced some sort of attack. Not all of those have ended up in a loss, and not all of those losses were giant, but they are frequent, especially as your company gets more information or you start making more money, which is the goal. The attacks start to increase. And like they've been saying, making sure that that trickles down to all of your employees, and maybe setting up some type of, people call it war games, between, your employees, have things sent out, and make sure that they can detect those. But until that gets down into the subconscious, you're never going to feel that back of the neck tingle. But as soon as you get that to really take hold and become part of the culture, then they're gonna see that stuff right away.
Awesome.
One thing I'd like to point out too is that in addition to hacking, one thing where cyber insurance can be very useful, and Rick, please chime in on this if you have experience with it, is false allegations of where people make false claims that possibly you were the source of an attack or being hacked. I've seen that before with clients where out of the blue, someone within their supply chain said, you hacked our systems or you caused this type of data breach. And it's very frightening because, all of a sudden you're getting an attack out of the blue. But the biggest thing is if you don't know how your data and your systems work, where your data is being processed or stored or transmitted, you can look stupid, where you very well could be a target that says, well, maybe it was us, I really don't know. But if you have a really good handle on the fundamentals of how your data is stored and processed, you can hopefully avoid those type of false acquisition.
Yeah, I mean, just like with general liability, a lot of that coverage is relying on the lawyers, because if you start working with somebody new and then let's say 2 months later they have an attack, I mean, the first thing they're going to think of is, hey, what changed? And it definitely could be somebody that's not you, and it could be a coincidence, but they're going to look at filing a lawsuit and especially if they're in a hole, try to help somebody out of it. And if you have that coverage, the forensic team can come in and say, nope, it wasn't us. We have everything locked down. And if it's a business that you rely on, then depending on what kind of coverages you have, if it's affecting you, you can help to make sure that gets right.
Awesome. I want to ask for any other questions. I know we're talking a lot about incident response, which is a great topic and something we hope that none of you have to ever deal with, but having a good plan in place will help that happen, right? You'll never have to use the plan if you have a good plan. I guess that's probably overly optimistic, huh? But any audience questions, feel free to unmute.
Yep.
Dave, did you have something you want to comment on?
I do. I'm taking on a huge challenge in my life right now. I'm writing a book on cybersecurity that I expect to publish later this year. And it's very specifically from a business owner to business owners, not a technologist. And Adam and Dave and Tom, and I see Jerry Leishman's on the call with Cortac, some really bright names in cybersecurity, especially around CMMC. And they come in and out of talking about really important topics. And I'm reminded of this circle logo thing I see over and over again, and it says people, process, technology. And what people miss in all of this over and over again is it's not a technology problem. It is a business problem. I talked to a prospective client yesterday who said, I've outsourced all my HR because I realize HR is a huge risk to my business. And I equate HR to being just like IT. And he nailed it. Right? This focus on what your people are doing and how they're behaving and the social engineering. Social engineering is nothing more than the classic con that's been around for millennia, right? So having the right insurance in place, ensuring that you're insuring yourself against the insurance. I believe it was Adam that touched on how important it is to fill in those gaps. So if you do need the insurance, they're not finding the loopholes. It's complex. But I meet over and over and over again, I meet business owners that just don't believe the risk is there. They don't believe it's as strong as it is. And I can't stress enough, it is. and it isn't a technology problem. You have to own it, and you have to set that culture, and you have to push that culture down throughout your organization, or you will suffer. It will happen.
Yeah, thank you. No, great information. I'll ask maybe our panelists to chime in on that. Who, if you're putting together a cybersecurity team for your organization or an organization you work with, what are the key components that who are the people on that? I know Dave mentioned it shouldn't just be the technology people. Who are the components?
I think the main,
Yeah.
not necessarily in the core technology team, but I think the most important aspect to having cybersecurity really function well in an organization is leadership. So the leadership has to be behind this 100%. And if the leadership is not behind it, if they're half-hearted about it, if they don't believe the need for it, ultimately goes nowhere, or it just sort of, treads water, so to speak. It doesn't, you'll get a half-finished project. It won't go to completion in whatever goal there is for it. So leadership is number one. As far as who else is on the team, I know Adam, he does training in this. So he helps companies define who that is. And Tom is an expert in really, pretty much anything having to do with compliance. So I'm sure either one of those can speak in greater detail on that. But without leadership supporting it 100%, it just doesn't work from what we've seen.
And I'll chime in on that. I agree completely, but this goes back to the idea of like this, incident response plan, an IRP, where if you think about it, everything has to be specific to your organization. So you create different playbooks for different scenarios. One can be, bad security practices. One can be, if someone has illegal content, from child porn to foreign company or foreign intellectual property, someone stealing stuff and bringing it into the company. All these different things. Some might require law enforcement, some might require HR, some might require legal, some might be pure just IT. So it's having these different playbooks that and again, it ties back to those incidents of indicators of compromise. So if you see this, you pull that playbook and you run that playbook. So you're not having to make stuff up on the fly. It's just that is your likely path forward to successfully dealing with that incident.
I would just add, our focus is small businesses, training and coaching small businesses through this compliance process. And Dave, absolutely spot on. It's all about leadership to develop the culture. So what we're all going to ultimately have, and by all, I mean, not just defense industrial based companies, not just manufacturing sector, but literally every company in this country is going to have to adopt a cybersecurity culture that is analogous to the safety culture. So eventually there will be something like OSHA for cybersecurity for all companies in this country. And that culture starts with leadership. It's top down. If you manufacturers and machine shops, if your CEO goes on the shop floor and is not wearing his or her safety glasses, then that sets a bad precedent and it destroys the safety culture within the organization. So it's top down. But I would add, especially for the small business, actually for all businesses, the cybersecurity team is everyone. Your cybersecurity program is only as good as the weakest link, and your weakest links are your end users, the folks that use the endpoints. So they all need to be read into, all need to be brought into the cybersecurity program. Cybersecurity will eventually need to be inculcated by everyone in the organization. And that starts with establishing a culture and then training on that culture. And like I said, inculcating, embodying that culture from the leadership. My 2 cents, thanks.
Awesome. I'm going to invite Paul Michaels with GM Nameplate on the line as well. He is presenting this afternoon, actually, and this is a great segue to what he was going to talk about lessons learned on implementing cybersecurity for your organization. He's the director of aerospace for GM nameplate and went through a cybersecurity process. So I'm going to have him join the panel. We can all still chat about this, but I thought he might have some comments on sitting in the seat, looking at implementing a cybersecurity program, and what were the decision-making processes that he went through. So Paul, take it away.
Good. Thank you very much. Really honored to be here and have a chance to speak. You know, some of the things Dave Henderson and Adam Austin said really resonated with me. And I'll share with you that, you know, I think when you look at kind of any journey that you go through in leadership, I think it's really important to kind of acknowledge shortcomings that you may have had. And I can admit that I think we've all been in the room when someone's pitching a new idea or a new concept, and there's somebody kind of in the back of the room. I don't know if you guys can see me, but it's kind of doing this, you know, this position where they're there because they have to, and they're not really buying what the person's talking about. I was that guy. I was the guy. And I had a few folks that were with me on that same path where, you know, it was kind of the thought was, this is an IT thing. Let IT deal with this. And if they think it's worthwhile, then maybe we'll table it. Maybe we'll talk about it. Maybe it'll be something we kick the can down the road. And that's very easy to do, especially when you have to look at, frankly, cost, when you're looking at spending money on an initiative that in a lot of ways people don't understand. So let me rewind a couple of years back, pre-COVID, and I was at a PNDC conference down in Oregon, and I got to meet Dave Miller, and he spoke. He was at our table. We were doing all these round tables, and he was speaking about it. And I will share with you guys that he was the first one. I'm not a technology person. I have to surround myself with people that are a lot smarter than me in that regard. But Dave was the first person that was able to articulate it to me in a way that wasn't about fear. It wasn't about talking it in a way that technology that was way over my head. You know, I still look to my niece to show me tips on my iPhone. So, and he spoke to me in a way that was like, listen, this isn't just a technology issue, along the lines of what Dave Henderson was saying. This is a business decision that you have to make. And the more I thought about it, and the more he and I engaged, you know, we stayed in touch, and he would ping me every couple months or so and check in with us. And I did a lot of research on my own because I wanted to become educated on it before I presented it to our board. And it really came down to a couple things. One is, you know, the first thing that a board is going to ask is, how much does it cost? And that's understandable. That's practical. You know, when you're being pragmatic in business, you want to look at cost, you want to look at ROI. So that was number one. But as our discussions kind of kept going, and Dave kind of gave me information, and I got connected with some great folks over at Impact Washington, and I need to give them a shout and thank you, because they helped actually facilitate some of the funding for this to make this happen. So that was a great outlet for us, and a great resource that we were able to leverage. But it really came down to the risk, really not a unique spot within the supply chain. We purchase raw materials, we convert them, we manufacture them into products, and we sell them to our customers. We're a custom manufacturer, so we are reliant heavily on the success and the flow of the supply chain. And my apologies, I can't remember. I think it might have been you, Rick, that talked about, and if it wasn't, I'm sorry, that was talking about how, you know, you have to think about not just your own place in the supply chain, but also when you take these measures, when you do the gap analysis, when you make a commitment to doing this, you're also, I think, setting a standard that some of other organizations that may look to you for what best in class practices are. You know, you're setting the bar to say, okay, this is now the new normal. This is what's expected for us to continue to do business together. And so we're still in the process. We did a great gap analysis with Dave's group with Future Networking. They were extremely patient, answered a lot of questions that our folks had. And yes, it is the IT folks that do have to engage. It's kind of the smart people connecting with the smart people, right? But what I did find was that as we went through the process, you know, our leadership, myself included, kind of looked around and said, hey, this isn't just something that we need to do. This is really going to be something that's going to be expected from our customers, from we supply to the OEMs and we look at them for what's best in class, right? As other companies may look to that might be smaller than ours, what's best in class. So just from a leadership standpoint, it's something that I realized that if we were not engaged at the level that we became and the directives that we put out and the expectations and the milestones that we collaborated with Dave and his team to make sure that we hit as a group, it just wouldn't have been successful. And Adam, I think you might have said, and I'm sorry if I'm quoting some folks wrong, you all said a lot of great things, but it was about, if the leadership is not engaged 100%, it's not going to go anywhere. It's just not. And at this state, at the environment that we're in right now, where there's just more and more technological espionage going on, there's more and more ransomware going on. It's something that we have to be in front of, because it can happen to me. I mean, I personally know 2 organizations that were hit very, very hard from this, and they're in the same boat that we were in, where this happens to somebody else. This happens to, the multi-billion-dollar organizations, not ours, but it happens to everyone. And the scariest thing was, and again, we did not want to be driven by fear. We wanted to be driven by pragmatic, execution, where we said, okay, this is something that's going to be a business necessity. Was that, seeing organizations that maybe have been hit once get hit again, right? And so, because why not go back to the well, right? But I just need to pause and say that from a leadership standpoint, that without our engagement, I don't think it would have happened. Dave, I'm sure you've probably had to, you know better than I, you've had to deal with a lot more companies in this regard, but that type of engagement was key. And getting that engagement was really just about education. It was, again, not being driven by fear. It was about saying, this is something that is going to be expected of our customers, right? And really, this is where the bar is going to be set now. So it's an investment that we've made. And again, we're still in the process. Most of you, or some of you, may know that we were recently acquired by the Boyd Corporation. So we do have some initiatives that we're realigning, and this is one of them that we're planning on continuing and seeing the closure. But just getting the thing started really all came down to just, a very, in my mind, a very fortunate meeting that I had down that was facilitated by PNDC. And then also just the forward thinking that Impact Washington did and engaged and helped us get aligned with future networking and really get to the next steps of where we need to be ultimately. So I hope that's helpful. I know that, sometimes folks regret giving me the mic because I'll just go, but this is something that I'm passionate about. And it's something that, again, I was the guy in the back of the room saying, I don't understand why we need this, but at that last conference, thank you, PNDC, I was converted, and I continue to spread the gospel of the important. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, Paul,
I appreciate it.
we'll have you stay on the line. I'm sure we'll have some questions. We talked about executive
Any questions, I'm
leadership.
happy to.
Awesome. Thank you. Great. We talked about executive leadership. We talked about the IT team. Since we do have Tom Cornelius on the line, I wanted to maybe have you comment on that other piece, the documentation, the policy piece that I think a lot of people don't realize on that. Do you want to kind of give a little bit of an insight into that?
Sure, and I'll ping this off of Rick too, because this is where it goes to the aspect of 2 sides of the coin. You have due care and you have due diligence. The documentation, your policies, your standards, your written procedures helps provide evidence of due care, what a reasonable person in your place would have. So if you have documentation that's 10 years old, hasn't been really reviewed, isn't applicable to your business model, and is really not making you compliant or secure, that is not what a reasonable person would have. So that documentation therefore becomes a liability. And then on the due diligence side of things, if you can't prove that you're patching your systems, that you're providing education and training, all the stuff that your policies and standards should do, then again, you fail the aspect of due diligence, or sorry, I switched the 2 around. Due diligence is really more your documentation, and the due care of your training, your ongoing patching. So if you're failing to have, evidence of those two, due care and due diligence, that's really where you can be considered negligent. And, then you're just open up a whole can of worms that insurance might not be able to touch you, and a prosecuting attorney will have a field day with you. Rick, anything to add on that?
Yeah, and it's on the due diligence side, where insurance is involved. Just making sure that you are doing everything that you said that you were going to do. You cannot have, if you're not in a compliance situation, you cannot have some of the controls that other companies have. And as long as that's written in the application, that's not something that you're doing, you can still get coverage. But I think it's best for all of us to move towards having their hygiene to the point where they are doing the due diligence.
And several years ago, there used to be kind of common for even large companies to say it's better to have something not written down and be able to claim ignorance, like, oh, well, we never knew it was a requirement. That defense has been shot down numerous times. And so the ability to claim blissful ignorance, again, is just food for a prosecuting attorney to say you're negligent. So that's where you have to have eyes wide open what your requirements are, and you're doing the proper care and feeding so that you are a good business member of the community and not just someone who's a liability to others.
That brings up a great point. CMMC is ahead of the curve when it comes to the model of actually proof that you're doing what you say that you're doing. And that, I think, is going to be pretty widespread, and it's beginning to go into insurance as well. And so I think if you're in a situation where you have the controls and you have the certified people that are saying, yes, those controls are in place and they're patched and active and being monitored, and you can relay that to an underwriter, you're going to be in a great place.
Great. Thank you. I guess another reason not to just throw it on the IT person's desk, as Paul said. You need that executive leadership. You need the policies, procedures in place. Adam, do you have any comments on that? I know with the training that you do, you talk a lot about those different aspects.
Yeah, I actually had a question for Paul, if that's cool. Paul, it was a great little discussion you had there of your business. You mentioned the term directives. I was curious if those were internal directives or external to your suppliers and vendors, or like maybe both. And maybe if you could explain an example of one of those directives.
Sure. Thank you, Adam. And I probably could have done a better job clarifying that. So thank you for asking. When we were talking about directives, it was really internal. And, just a couple pieces that I know we've talked about today, but that are so necessary. Number one, the leadership, the executive level buy-in, support from the board of directors was immense. With Impact Washington, obviously helped alleviate some of the financial concerns, frankly. One of the things that was really necessary for us was, somebody within operations as a project manager who has oversight of the entire thing. So that was the person that the executive team really helped convey the directives to make sure that they were executed in line with what, future networking in this example needed from us. And even above all of that was just a willingness to say, we are going to open our doors completely, because without full access, without full and open communication, it's not an audit. That's what you have to keep reminding people. Nobody's pointing fingers. Nobody's saying, hey, look at all these terrible weaknesses in your systems. It's more about, groups like Future Networkers are coming out and saying, okay, how can we help you? How can we get you to where you need to be? In order to do that, you've got to be completely open book with us, and just to have that willingness to fully participate, fully be open, and fully share everything that we have within that scope. Just understanding that there's going to be concerns, right? You're working with human beings, so we're going to make mistakes, making sure that realistic expectations are set. that milestones are checked off and that we're meeting and talking on a regular cadence so the visibility stays there, so it doesn't die on the vine. I think sometimes, making things, initiatives like this and having them succeed a lot depend on, how the cadence that everyone keeps them going. So the directives that we're talking about were really internal ones where we said, hey guys, executive leadership is buying off on this. We're asking everyone's support, and here are the things that we need from you. So those were really internal type directives. I hope that helps answer your question. And also I did want to speak a little bit more about some of the things, or I wanted to add a few things that we felt were really necessary for success. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Making sure that everybody in the organization understands that leadership is serious about this activity.
Yeah, and also helping people understand that this affects all of us. This affects the success of all of us, because if this organization or any organization is held, for ransomware or whatever, some kind of malicious attack, it doesn't just affect the executive levels. It affects everyone from, the folks that are working in the cafeteria to the folks that are making the decisions at a board level and everyone in between. So you really have to look at it as a unified front where we're saying, okay, there's going to be solidarity within the organization. These are the objectives that we want to meet. These are the directives that we're giving to make sure that we hit all those objectives and be successful together.
Well, I just want to add one thing on here, and this kind of goes back to also what Rick mentioned previously about, if you're filling out your cybersecurity application, your insurance application, and maybe you're not doing multi-factor authentication, you're doing these other things that are common requirements. Being non-compliant, it is an issue that has to be taken seriously. But there's a difference between putting your head in the sand and not doing anything versus having a prioritized risk-based plan that might take you a year, 2 years, 3 years, that you're working through the most important things first, and then getting to the point where you have a path towards compliance, because that evidence right there, shows what a reasonable person would do to, again, help minimize the aspect of someone saying that you're negligent. Yes, you're not compliant, but I do have a plan, and this is how we're funding it. This is how we're implementing it, to show that, again, what you're doing to not be negligent.
And I think
the loss plan is something that is, or the plan to get controls in place is something that at this point insurance companies are looking at. So that can help benefit you if you have the planning in place to start to get things under control.
And just to follow on with all of this, speaking specifically about CMMC, CMMC is made up of a set of practices under certain specific domains, and that are supported by processes which include policies. That's which defines the activities within the organization. And as part of that, most of the support is behavioral. Most of compliance is behavioral. It's not just all technical. It is how the people within the organization act within it. So when it comes to the business as a whole, yes, a certain part is highly technical, but the majority of it is how people behave in the organization. And I think that's probably one of the greater takeaways I had when first being introduced to CMMC. Initially thinking that it was just all techie, but really understanding that it's policies and behaviors regarding those policies is what defines the outcome.
We'll just add on to what Dave's saying in terms of behavior. It makes me smile at our organization when I start having our line workers, our repair workers, ask me questions about cybersecurity. Like, hey, am I doing this well? Am I following the policy? Am I following the rules here? Does this CUI marking on this covered document look correct? And I tell our clients that when the day-to-day line workers start asking those questions, you'll know that a cybersecurity culture is taking hold, and that's one of the first signs of success in the organization in terms of cybersecurity.
To go off of that, I think the next step as an industry is is we're trying to get the connection with all of the workers, but then getting that connection with all of the people that you're subcontracting to, or making sure they have a plan in place, and making sure that they know that you're trying to, if there is a loss, you're trying to help mitigate it, and you have plans in place so they're not hiding something or trying to keep it to themselves. So making sure that they're getting that taken care of, working with you, and trying to get that culture to permeate past your company and benefit everybody.
Great. I want to invite some of our partners on the line. I don't know, Damon or Carol, do you have any questions? Dale King with PNNA, feel free to chime in here. Or anyone else. So I think one thing that you said is really important is not, if people are coming to you with cybersecurity questions, don't make them feel like they've done anything wrong. Oh, that open dialogue and inviting people to come to you with questions or things that they might have clicked on a link. That is so important in keeping that dialogue open. Yeah. Tom, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up just a couple points. Is that since it is PNDC, I mean, most likely, most of the people on this call, their baseline of what's defining what right looks like is going to be NIST 800-171 and CMMC, which is a subset of NIST 853, which is the kind of the gold standard for security in the U.S. So it's using that as kind of the benchmark. That might not be everything. You might have privacy requirements from Washington or Oregon perspective, or even European clients. So it's defining what we like to say your minimum compliance requirements, your must-haves versus your discretionary requirements, which are nice-to-haves. Because oftentimes, if you do something purely from a compliance perspective, it's not going to make you secure. And but usually if you focus more on good security, compliance will be a natural byproduct. So it's really going through and understanding what what right looks like, because there are some things that can be kind of considered security theater. They look really cool and they sound really cool, blinky lights and all, but it really doesn't move the needle forward from making you more secure. So you may actually find situations where through training or through something administrative, you may get a better benefit than actually buying new technology. So it's all about understanding really what's going to make the most sense for your business case.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up with that. Is that there's kind of two tracks that we look at. I mean, we're a cybersecurity company, so we follow sort of the data-driven process. What is a real threat? What threats are actually attacking people here and now? And then the framework supports just really good, solid cyber hygiene, whichever framework that is. I mean, it could be ISO, for example, but we're focused on CMMC and NIST because that is the demand in this region. So, ransomware right now seems to be the hot topic because a lot of companies are getting hit with ransomware. I mean, day in and day out in the local area. And then, how to mitigate that under the framework. So there's specific answers to that. So there's two tracks, but both really need to be followed in the compliance realm.
And it's funny, just to go off of what Dave mentioned, I completely agree. And a lot of people are really worried about, ransomware. And NIST published a draft document earlier this year, where in some ways they kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, yeah, it's kind of difficult. But the thing that they did highlight is that you have monitoring, but the most important thing you can do is have really good secure baseline configurations. So that if it's someone putting a USB in, or that your admin isn't running, or like say, a receptionist isn't running admin permissions, so if they do click on that link, ideally they're blocked from installing something or compromising a system instead of having full keys to the kingdom. Those type of things, they're not, considered cool. They're really, boring type things for, technicians to do. And oftentimes they don't cost very much money. If you have a Windows Active Directory network, you can push out a group policy object and you can lock down systems literally in minutes. But that's often overlooked by a lot of companies because maybe the CEO or the president wants to have a 2-character password instead of something a little more secure that would make it more problematic for the rest of the company. So those little things of hardening your systems is the best investment you can make to avoid ransomware in the first place.
What Tom's talking about is actually a requirement in NIST 800-171. It's specifically called out secure baselines. So.
Well, and actually, just to play devil's advocate, they don't say what you've got to do. So technically, you could say I've got a quote unquote secure baseline configuration, and you're just requiring 8-character passwords, and then it skips everything else.
Yeah.
So the Center for Internet Security, DISA, STIGs, even go to Microsoft. For Microsoft has secure recommendations. If you go off of those and you find out what right looks like, work with companies like Totem or any other reputable security and tech companies, they can help you solve this stuff. And oftentimes it's templatized. You can push that stuff out in minutes. The issue that some companies run into is that if you're coming from a place of weakness, like you've got stuff that is running like Windows 95 or Windows 98, you could break stuff. But if you have a plan, like you segment off stuff that you will break, which again is good practice within CMMC anyways, you're going to minimize the security risk associated with those bad systems that are old enough to drive or old enough to vote, and you're also just making it so that the biggest target you have, your average end user computers, you're minimizing that attack surface so that they're not going to be attacked by ransomware, or if they do, it won't be successful.
Great.
Put a link in the chat to the Microsoft Security Toolkit that Tom's mentioning. It's a great resource for free from Microsoft for hardening Windows servers and workstations. Awesome. Like a great first step to get your stuff hardened.
Awesome. Damien, did you have a question?
No, I was going to, chime in and just share, I'm not a cybersecurity professional. I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, but working with all these great professionals and listening to them, one of the things I did want to highlight for those who are manufacturers and maybe who are realizing the scale of detail and there's all these complexities here that, one of the things that I'm seeing is that this is a lot like, and I'm hearing these words, I'm hearing words like compliance, management system, people. And, what we see is that this implementation of cybersecurity systems are a lot like maybe the implementation of an ISO 9001 or some ISO type management system ultimately, in that it's something 20, 25 years ago, people were like, oh my gosh, we're never going to be able to do this. But now we have companies with less than 10 employees who are capable of implementing effective ISO systems. And so I think I'm not equating CMMC to ISO exactly, but it is a lot about rules and building culture, because that's how you really get an effective quality system or effective safety system in your organization. It's about understanding what the rules are, which ones apply to your company, which ones are going to help you accomplish your goals, building those into culture, not just something that's on paper, but that's something that's actually happening with your people. And so these professionals here, they have all the details. It's amazing. But I think, for companies who may be, concerned about, can we do this? I just want to encourage them. Absolutely, you can. It's all very doable. It is complex, but that's why these professionals will help you fill in the gaps. These people have that very specific knowledge, but a lot of the work is just building good management systems, integrating it with your existing management systems, and communicating with your people effectively, educating them, and helping to integrate cyber as part of your culture. And that's really achievable, especially when you've got folks like these who can help you answer those tough questions. So anyway, I just wanted to chime in.
Well,
Awesome,
just to add on what Damon was saying, part of it is, especially with a CMMC perspective, you go back to an ISO, it's understanding what your business process is. because you may find that like right now you look at it, you go do a gap assessment and you're thinking like, oh my gosh, my entire company is in scope. This is going to be cost too much money, take too much time. But if you work with a IT professional who can say, okay, great, this is where your data is flowing from the DoD to a prime to a sub, down to you or whatever that is, and you're able to identify that business process, you may be able to find that you're able to segment off your manufacturing floor or a couple computers, and now your scope is half dozen different systems versus your entire network. And so you minimize cost, complexity, and the scope. So a little bit of homework can save a lot of time and money and headaches.
I do want to
see you
comment.
nod.
On that. It does need to be on a case-by-case basis, because some companies, it's really like their entire organization, and then other companies, you can encapsulate it depending upon what they're doing for the DoD, what products they're making, and the personnel that are involved with that. So, in some cases, it makes a lot of sense. In other cases, it makes no sense.
Right. I completely agree with that. And again, it comes down to understanding what the business is and where the data is being stored, transmitted, and processed.
Yeah.
That can also
Go ahead.
that can also create a really big effect on the insurance side as well, looking at those systems that can be controlled and ensuring the things that you need to.
Great. If I could just add to something Damon said that he said kind of quickly, but I think is just hugely important here is the culture. And, we for years, and I've spoken at PNA about this, about 15 years ago, we really worked in a reactive type culture. And I'll tell you, when you are on your toes and you are a proactive, forward-thinking, engaging culture, it is such a better way of life, not just business, but life, than being on your heels all the time. So Damon, I think what you said is just something that really needs to be in bold highlight, and that is a culture that embraces looking forward. And this is a looking forward initiative. It's bigger than just management system engagement. It's bigger than any of that. It's something that we really have to think about long-term for the next generation of the folks that are going to be running this company, right? So that culture piece is something that you mentioned. You said it really quickly, but my ears perked up because that's something is just it's just a huge piece for long-term success. So thank you for mentioning that. But I really wanted to highlight it from someone who's converted.
Well, it's good business. One of the things we're seeing subcontractors who are now looking at something like CMMC as their opportunity to become a prime. Like if they can get certified and they can now, leapfrog their position in the supply chain, it just makes good business sense to embrace security and compliance.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask each one of our panelists maybe to do some closing remarks. What are you hoping people are going to walk away from this program doing? I think, Paul, like you said, take action, be proactive. So, Tom, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Drink a lot of coffee and just read the documentation. If you don't actually read what the requirements are, you're going to be clueless going forward. So just take some time to educate yourself.
And follow Tom on LinkedIn for more coffee and conversations advice. Great. Adam, did you want?
Yeah, I would just continue on a theme that Tom had started with a few minutes ago about characterizing the information, the life cycle of the information in your environment as one of the first steps after you've had your coffee and read all the regulations. Determining where the information you receive this information that bears this protection from the DoD, how it's processed and accessed internally, and then if you have to disseminate it or transmit it externally, how all that happens, and characterize that entire life cycle with the view of always in the back of your mind, shrinking that footprint of the system components that support that life cycle as much as possible, so that you can realize some potential cost savings, both in implementation, ongoing monitoring, insurance costs, certainly reduce the risk. That's the very first step in the compliance journey. Don't go out right away and start buying technology. characterize the information lifecycle first.
Right.
Thanks,
Dave.
Kate.
Thanks. Dave Miller.
Sure. So, I mean, of course, going down into the rabbit hole, so to speak, of talking specifically about, the requirements of any one framework, be it CMMC, be it NIST, that's important. But from what we see as a cybersecurity company is that cybersecurity is a lifestyle. It's understanding, it's a situational awareness vision, if you will. So these frameworks are amazing, and they do assist, but people really getting a sense of kind of being on their guard, being on their toes, knowing that there's a risk out there. So many companies that we have spoken with in the past just don't accept the risk. They hear about it, they read about it, whatever. They just say, as we've heard from the other panelists here, it won't happen to us. But then it does, or it happens to their best friend or something like that. So, it's just like going out after a nice dinner at night and wherever your car is parked and just looking out for hoodlums. They're out there. They may not be in your parking lot, hopefully not, but it's a lifestyle. It's situational awareness. It's unfortunately part of what we have to be aware of today in the modern world. So that's really the foundation from where we come from.
Lifestyles of the secure and compliant, right?
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better, Kate.
Great. Rick, did you have something you wanted to share in closing?
Yeah, I think for what we do, it's all about figuring out what risk you want to take on and what risk you want to insure. So I think just coming away with sitting down and figuring out what those are early. And so you can plan towards those, figuring out what risks you are going to control and take on yourself and what risks you are going to put onto a third party to insure. I think starting that conversation early will get you in a great spot moving forward.
Okay. Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. First off, thank you, Kate. Thank you, PNDC, for the opportunity to share. I'm always honored to share our wins, our failures, whatever it is, if other folks within the aerospace cluster and defense cluster can benefit from it. I would say that just, somebody had mentioned ISO, and just like ISO, just like those types of initiatives, this is ongoing. So it's not like you get to the finish line and you're done. So it's a real commitment long-term for your business. As Dave knows, we're still learning. We're still in the process. We're never going to be able to do the touchdown dance because the environment, the conditions, technology is going to continue to evolve. So this is a commitment that we are now in for the long term. So if there are folks here that want to reach out to me, I put my email address. You can reach me on LinkedIn. Also, I'd be happy to talk with you about executive engagement when it comes to these, like helping to get them to the table to understand the importance of it. Happy to do that. And then also just a huge thank you also to the folks over to Damon and to Dave and their team at Impact Washington, because, without whom I don't know for sure, but I know for sure that they definitely helped us get to the finish line. So thank you. And of course, thank you to Dave Miller for his leadership and coaching for our organization. So happy to help any way I can.
Great. Dale King with PNAA. Did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. This morning I had a fishy looking email, and so I did the email analysis on it, and I was able to quickly and simply, put that in the phishing box. So I just want to do a call out to Dave Henderson and the CyberStreams team. They keep us safe, and I just, it's just not, it's not complex. It's just developing a new habit and just being aware. And so, it's happening all the time, and I just appreciate the IT support that keeps us safe.
Awesome. Damien,
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you for the plug, Dale. Dale's mentioning something we do with all of our clients that includes something called catch fish on their email. So we're mock phishing them all the time. And if you catch fish those, you get a big score on the reader board. So training
Awesome.
that culture, making it a part of your lifestyle.
Gamification. Great. Damian Nix, did you have any closing remarks?
Nothing specific, but I do want to encourage certainly all the manufacturers out there, whatever state you're in, reach out to your MEP. Impact Washington, the state of Washington, we want to serve that role as trusted advisor. If you're interested in cybersecurity, we would love to help connect you with great resources here, help you set up a project and get started on your journey. So that's what we want to do. We want to help you take that next step. So thanks, Kate. Thanks
Great.
to everyone for joining us today.
Perfect. And I did pull up the logos, at least of the Northwest Impact or the MEPs. So Impact Washington, OMAP in Oregon, Tech Help in Idaho, and Alaska MEP in Alaska. So if you need any help connecting, please feel free to reach out to any of us and we can make an introduction. I will let you know that we do have our next Cybersecurity Forum coming up November 18th. So please feel free to register the PNDC site. I've also on the Impact Washington YouTube site are recordings of our past programs. If you want to catch up on anything, please let us know or feel free to watch those recordings. And with that, I think we are concluding today's program. I wanted to again give a big thank you to all our speakers that have joined us here today. Great information, great expertise. I think most of them have chatted their contact information in the chat, and I'm going to tell you how you can download that for follow-up. If you go to the place where you would type in a chat and click the three little dots there, the ellipses next to that, it'll give you the option to download the chat. In addition to links that people put in there, you'll also see some acronyms that we have defined in the chat, which is always helpful as you're working your way through this acronym-rich subject matter. So great. Thank you all for joining us here today. And with that, we'll conclude the webinar. I will just stay on the line for a few minutes as everybody downloads their chat.